Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we will be bringing you some video game reviews of Astral Chain on the Nintendo Switch and Control, which is on PS4, Xbox. You played it on PS4, I think, Sean.
Yes, I did.
Yes. So those are two new video games that we have been playing. I've beat Astral Chain. Have you beat Control?
I haven't quite beat it, but I'm getting very, very close.
Okay, so we can give pretty complete thoughts on those, probably spoiler-free. Those will be our main reviews. We're also just going to play some fun catch-up. It's been a couple of weeks since Sean and I recorded together. It's actually been a while. You've heard episodes with us, but I have not talked to you in several weeks, Sean. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. I am absurdly busy, which is why we didn't have a normal podcast last week. Is just I had a lot of teacher stuff I had to get done. So yeah, like that is mostly what my life has been is teacher stuff and like getting some Control in here and there when I can play it.
I'm sorry.
It's, it is what it is.
Yeah. My life's been busy. It's been good though. I'm actually going to be back out in Colorado next week, Sean. I don't know if we'll have time to see each other. Because I'm going to be there midweek. My stepsister is getting married. So
congratulations.
I've got that coming up. That'll be fun. But yeah, we're gonna talk about some stuff today. Want to do some quick housekeeping. Last week, our full episode was another Weekly Suit Gundam, but because I know not everybody listens to the Gundam episodes, and there was a big Nintendo Direct about a week and a half ago, I didn't want to save that for today when I think it would have been pretty outdated. So I did do a sort of solo podcast, and then at the last minute, wound up bringing my brother Thomas on from Japan. So we had an episode 298.5, which was a little episode on the Nintendo Direct. Did you listen to any of that, Sean?
Yes, Jonathan, I did. I listened to the whole thing while I was finishing up my Tall Geese. I was doing panel lining and listening to your podcast.
That sounds fun.
So, yes.
Yeah, Thomas...
it was good. I enjoyed it.
Thomas, I thought, I really liked having him on. One, because I think he actually brought some really interesting... perspective on my favorite thing was on the new Japanese consumption tax coming in, which is a good explanation for why Nintendo's September is so bonkers crazy. And that was interesting. But then also I really liked at the end of the episode, I tried to get him to give me one piece of fun Japanese trivia and he couldn't think of it and I just cut the show and that made me laugh very hard.
Yeah, no, it was a very Thomas. I mean, that when I found out that Thomas was going to be on it, that was when I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to listen to this podcast then because I'm very curious what a Thomas cast is when I'm not on it.
It was fun.
But very good.
Yeah, but now we're back with a full episode. We should, keep pimping Weekly Suit Gundam. It's going strong. We've got 9 full episodes up now, all the way through Char's Counterattack, the movie. And I don't know if you've been watching the YouTube versions, Sean, but episode 9 debuted our new sort of permanent theme song, because we're coming up on a bunch of Gundam stuff that does not have, like, normal opening themes, and I didn't want to keep editing a new one every week. So I made a new one using a PS2 era animation, the original Tobey Gundam theme, and some cool opening credits, and I'm very happy with how that turned out, and that's going to be on there going forward on the YouTube versions. So, yeah.
Yes, it is very awesome.
The YouTube versions have a lot of Easter eggs. There was one at the end of episode 8, the Double Zeta Gundam one, that was my favorite thing I've ever edited for this podcast, and you said terrified you. So there you go.
It's good, it's funny, but you probably shouldn't have done it.
No,
it's probably a net negative for the world that exists now.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump ahead. Let's do some stuff, Sean. My first piece of stuff, I just want to say, is we've never done this on the show, but I need to do a live taste test with a new flavor of Mountain Dew. Because I was at the store yesterday. I was at the store, Sean, and I was buying a Mountain Dew, and they have a Mountain Dew Voodoo Halloween mystery flavor. And it is a weird, chalky white. You can see it on camera, Sean. The people can't see it, but you can Google it. The color is not appetizing. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's in this. It says mystery flavor. I am always fascinated by the weird Mountain Dew flavors. So I'm gonna brave this for the people on the podcast.
Okay, while you're doing this, I just want to note, mystery flavor is, in candy terms, what they say for just like all the leftover shit put together into one thing, and that's just what the mystery flavor is. It's all the dregs of your like Airheads or whatever the fuck it is. So I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
I just opened it, Sean. It smells like a bag of Skittles.
That's what mystery flavor should smell like. It should just be random bullshit.
It tastes like a bag of Skittles. Yeah, no, it literally tastes like I just put a bunch of Skittles in my mouth, but it's liquid. It's very weird. I don't get it. It's fruity, but not real fruit, obviously, because it's Mountain Dew. That's where the Skittles connection comes in.
Yeah, so that sounds like the authentic mystery flavor experience of we've just put everything left over from in the flavoring bucket into this vat, and this is what you get.
It's not bad. It's not good. It's not bad. But there you go. All right. Well, maybe that'll become a recurring segment. Probably not. Let's go on, Sean. What kind of stuff do you have for us today?
So we can make a very brief return trip down to Sean Chapman's Beta Corner.
It's Sean's Beta Corner with Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean, and this is my Beta Corner. We check out the latest and greatest in the hot world of video game betas. Last time on the program, which I think was basically last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, we talked about the alpha for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. It turns out there's a beta for Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and I've played some of that too. It's good. It's more just like normal Call of Duty. It's not just like the weird 1-2v2 mode they had for the alpha. You can level up. I think they capped it off at 10. You get unlocked. So it's like a very kind of like pared down experience of the more full Call of Duty multiplayer experience. They have a number of different modes, although you can't pick which mode you want to play. It's just basically a grab bag playlist. So sometimes you might be playing Team Deathmatch. Sometimes you might be playing Domination or Headquarters, which is frustrating to me because I basically only want to play Deathmatch in Call of Duty. Call of Duty is definitely not an objective game type sort of game to me. I know that there are people that like those modes. I do not like objective game types in first-person shooters that have that really, really like fast time to kill where you're just dying over and over and over again, because if your team is not playing the objective, it's just a constant stream of you getting shot by a more organized enemy team. But when you do play Team Deathmatch, the game is still really fun. The sort of sense of kind of weight to the movement in the aiming still carries through from that 2v2 mode. It feels a little bit slower, a little bit more tactical than Call of Duty has recently, and it kind of gets a little bit more of that Call of Duty 4 multiplayer feel back into Call of Duty, which is nice. And it's been fun playing that and feeling like I'm definitely going to get this game. Even if the campaign is not good, I am like in the mood for getting into Call of Duty multiplayer, which is something I haven't done since like 2014 or whenever Advanced Warfare came out. So the beta is live for basically anyone, I think, on PS4. I'm not sure if it's on other platforms yet or not. But people, if you are interested in checking out the Call of Duty Modern Warfare multiplayer stuff, you can just get into that beta, play a couple of rounds, see if you like the feel of it, because I think it's pretty cool. They're moving Call of Duty in the right direction. So I'm very excited to get more into Call of Duty multiplayer again, because it'll be nice to have a returning multiplayer game I can go back to, which is just not something I've had for a very long time.
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. I'm definitely... I did not know there was an open beta going on right now, or there was a second round of that, so I will have to check that out. That sounds fun. I will admit, Sean, I was slightly distracted during your answer just now, or during your spiel, because I took another sip of this Mountain Dew. I cannot stress how much this tastes like liquefied Skittles, because I have not eaten Skittles in maybe 10 years. I don't honestly remember the last time I would have done that. I feel like it would have been high school. Sean, my memory is being in the high school cafeteria eating Skittles when I drink this thing. It's very fucking weird.
Well, you can drink your Skittle juice and play Call of Duty and just like go back to 2007 and have a grand old time.
I'm going to be distracted by this the whole podcast because this is what I have to drink right now on my desk. Maybe a bad idea.
Well, that's good. It's going to be a very Skittles episode of the Weekly Stuff Podcast.
So fucking weird. Okay. Yes, but Call of Duty beta sounds good. What else we got? I will give some stuff now. We talked obviously on the Nintendo Direct episode that I did with Thomas about how the Nintendo Switch now has Super NES games with the Nintendo Switch Online service, which is really cool. And I have been playing The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening because I wanted to play that again before Link to the, or not Link's Awakening. I've been playing Link to the Past, which I've wanted to play before Link's Awakening comes out next week, the remake on Switch. So, and I was going to replay it one way or another, and then it was very fortuitous that they put it on Switch, makes it a lot easier. But I realized, Sean, playing that and some other Super NES games, I am finally fully fed up with the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which is a controller I like in just about every way, except it has one of the worst D-pads I've ever used. I love the Switch Pro controller. I love how it feels in my hands. It's easily the most comfortable controller I own to hold. I like it more just how it rests in my hands than the PS4 controller or Xbox One or any of those. I really like the thumbsticks. They're not quite as good as the Xbox One ones, but they're better than the PS4 ones. I like the spacing of the buttons and all that. But I hate the D-pad. It looks like a normal D-pad, but it's on there at such a weird slanted angle. It's kind of the problem the Xbox One has with its D-pad, but its D-pad is at least more accurate. But this one it's literally just, it's on there at a weird slant, and so it becomes so mushy, and it's constantly misrecognizing inputs. It's a terrible D-pad. And if you seriously play any 2D games, I think for most people it wouldn't matter, but if you play 2D games, and obviously Nintendo is the one platform where you want a good D-pad for 2D games, because it's where you're going to play the highest percentage of them, I was just fed up with it. So I was trying to find a good alternative. I can take my original Super NES controllers from the SNES Classic, the mini console they put out, and I have a wireless adapter that I can use to hook up GameCube controllers on my Switch. But it's kind of a weird workaround, and obviously the SNES controller does not have all the buttons needed for all the different inputs on Switch. So I finally got, there's a company called 8-Bit Do, that creates a lot of retro-style modern controllers for modern consoles. They mostly do them for PC, and then also for Nintendo Switch. And they have a line called the SN30, and then the SN30 Pro, and the newest one is called the SN30 Pro Plus. And these are based on the original Super NES controller, but they work on your modern Switch, and then they also work on your PC, Mac, Android phone, any of that stuff. And I was not sure about which one to get, so I kind of started slow. I got the SN30 Pro, which is a SNES controller where they have added two thumbsticks at the bottom, sort of like a PS4 controller. They're down on an even plane. And then an extra row of triggers plus a home and capture button. So it has every input that the Nintendo Switch has. And then what I got was the wired version of that, which is only $25. So it's a wired controller. It's half as much as the full wireless one. You don't get gyro controls, which I don't think you would need for most games that you primarily would be playing with a D-pad. But the benefit is that wireless third-party controllers on the Switch can actually not turn on the Nintendo Switch. You have to turn on the Switch separately and then connect to the controller. It's just something weird with how the Switch works, but wired controllers can. So I plug this thing in, it works great on that level, and I am loving this controller. I would highly recommend it if you want a controller for your Switch with a good D-pad. It is the original Super NES D-pad, still probably one of, if not the best D-pads you can get for a controller, plus all the other things that make the SNES controller good. I really, really like it. I've been playing Link to the Past with it. It's utterly perfect for that. And then it does work on every Switch game. Again, unless you need gyro controls, it's also got full rumble, but so it's got everything. It's a little awkward to play control sticks when it's got no grips and they're down at the bottom. It's kind of a funny controller for that. I tried playing a round of Smash Brothers with it, and it works. You can do it. It's just not the best way to play it. But that's not really what it's for. So I'm very much enjoying that, and I might have to spring soon for their new one, which is called the SN30 Pro Plus, which is basically this controller, but they've added big grips to it. So it kind of looks like a big PS4 controller with basically the SNES controller as the main body of it. And I might just replace my Pro Controller with that, because like I said, I like the Pro Controller in so many ways, but I probably more than most people I really like having a good D-pad. It's just really important to me. I like D-pads. The PS4 has a great D-pad. That's something I've always liked. And I also think if you're ever going to play games with a D-pad, I don't like the Xbox-style offset sticks, because it puts the D-pad in a very weird position for your thumb, I think. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, better. It's the ultimate reason why I ultimately do prefer the layout of the PS4 controller to anything else, because I think if both thumbsticks are down, that's fine for your thumbs. But if you have to go one like up and down with the D-pad and the buttons, I don't like that. So it's really nice. I'm glad this option exists for Switch. The wired one, like I said, $25 for that is nothing. And I am really enjoying it. And I've been having fun. I am 4 or 5 dungeons deep into Link to the Past, and that is still one of the best games ever made. And playing it the way God intended, with a real, honest-to-God D-pad and a basically a SNES controller, is very, very nice. And that SNES service they've introduced for Switch is fantastic. It's such a great lineup to start, and if they can add some cool games that we're missing, like Donkey Kong Country, fingers crossed, maybe Square Enix lets them do a Final Fantasy or something. There's a lot they could add, obviously, but it's a good start, and I'm really, really glad it's on Switch. And between that and the big NES library they have, and the Konami collections, like the Castlevania collection and the Contra collection, and then Capcom's done all the Mega Mans, there's a ton of 8 and 16-bit games on Switch, so it's kind of a paradise for that right now if you like that kind of game, and with all the bells and whistles of save states and rewinding and all that. So I'm really enjoying that.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's see. Okay, I have one other piece of stuff. Do you have anything else, Sean?
Not stuff.
Not stuff. Okay. Then here's my other piece of stuff. This is just a fun story that Thomas told me last night. We were playing Smash Brothers. He's in Japan, like I said. And Thomas told me that he got a text last night. He was at home playing a video game or something. Or, you know what he might have been doing, Sean? Little revelation for the podcast. Thomas is 23 episodes deep in Mobile Suit Gundam.
Fucking yes! Yes, it's happening! Yes!
I badgered him so much, and he's in it. He's having to watch it very slow because he's very busy and doesn't have a ton of free time. And one of the ways I enticed him is I'm like, Gundam's only like 22 episodes, and each episode is like very satisfying. You don't have to binge it, and he's enjoying it for that reason. But yes, so we have, Sean, we have claimed another soul.
Excellent. Very good.
But this story is, this story is not about Gundam though. So Thomas is at home, and he gets a text from one of his coworkers. And this is one of his Japanese coworkers at the school he works at. And she's been binging all of Game of Thrones now that it's over on... I don't know where Game of Thrones airs in Japan. I actually probably should have looked this up. Thomas didn't know either. It's obviously not HBO. I don't think HBO exists in Japan. But whatever, wherever Game of Thrones airs. And so she's been watching it. She finishes season 7, and she texts Thomas. He photographed the conversation for me. She texts, in all caps, Japan does not have all seasons of Game of Thrones. They decided not to show season 8. And Thomas is like, wait, what? Wow. If it makes you feel better, it's pretty bad. And then she says, season 7 has only 7 stories? Isn't it too short? And he says, season 8 is only 6. And she says, oh, I see. And he says, yeah, I mean, there's probably some way you can watch it. She says, but I'm in shock right now. I knew season 8 was going to be a mess, but I wanted to see it. And Thomas tried verifying this, but he could not find a news source. So I don't know if it's true. Probably it's just a delay and it hasn't come out in Japan yet. They have to subtitle it. I don't know if it's dubbed over there or whatever, or if it's just a licensing deal. But Sean, how fucking amazing would it be if the Japanese distributor of Game of Thrones just decided to never distribute season 8 because of how shitty it was?
It would be. I mean, it arguably would be the right choice. So just for them to pull out. I mean, they should have done it at the end of season 6 at the very least. I don't know why you'd even do season 7 at that point. Yeah, no, that's what they should do. You know, you're welcome, Japan. If you're saved from having to watch the last season of Game of Thrones, because it's not good.
Yeah. Oh, I have one other fun piece of stuff, Sean.
Okay.
I was in a Twitter conversation this week. I don't even remember quite how it started, but the Goku versus Superman thing came up again. Mm-hmm. And I just said, this is a dumb conversation, especially after Dragon Ball Super. Goku would wipe the floor with Superman. I'm 100% confident in that. People tended to agree with me. People did ask me, okay, but if we accept that, what Dragon Ball villains do we think Superman could beat? And I gave a list and tried to figure this out. But they and I both wanted your take on this as someone who is a Dragon Ball fan like me, but also does know more about Superman than I do. I think this is a perennial debate, so I just want your 5-second response to this, because I am curious how Sean Chapman comes down on it.
Okay, like one thing we need to lay out first is that Superman. It's depending on what version of Superman you're talking about, because there's no one he's not Goku. There's no one version of the character. So there's no, like, even if you say quote unquote like comic book Superman, you could be talking about a lot of different Supermans that have wildly different powers. So are we taking the most powerful version of Superman that has ever existed, or is it like the vague sort of like the general kind of more or less where he's at on average kind of Superman?
I was going to say more or less on average, but I guess that becomes unfair, because then you could get into, do we take Goku as Goku is at present in the media continuity of Dragon Ball, or do we take Goku from some other point in the story? I was going to say, I don't know, Superman as he is in like the Doomsday arc or something.
Okay, so just sort of like, let's just say more or less like Superman the Animated Series, Justice League, like that level kind of Superman, which is where most, I would say most comic book versions and the movie versions more or less are around that power level.
That sounds good.
Okay.
So what do you say on that?
Oh, so what's the specific question then?
Just who would win on that? Just basically with Superman.
Okay.
Do you agree with me that Goku wipes the floor with Superman?
With that level of Superman, and Dragon Ball Super level Goku, if we're talking like Ultra Instinct Goku, then that Goku I think would win. Or if Superman can edge out the fight, Goku would eventually be able to overcome Superman.
Because that's my point, is that Goku, this is the whole point of Goku, is that Goku always is fighting people who start out stronger than him, and then he comes up with something and gets stronger and wins. That's why, like, I don't even know if you need to pick Goku from a certain time period. Like, obviously, Kid Goku with his tail isn't going to beat Superman, but, you know, Goku fucking beat Jiren, who's supposed to be stronger than all the gods of destruction, and he came up with Megate no Gokui, and it's really cool. Of course Goku wins. I think it's a dumb question at this point.
Yeah. I will say, if you're taking the strongest version of Superman that has ever existed, Goku doesn't stand a chance.
What's the strongest version?
The strongest version of Superman is Silver Age era Superman, where he is able to relocate entire solar systems of planets by dragging them on a chain through space to another galaxy. That's the level of how powerful he is. If you're taking that level of Superman, nobody can beat that level, that Superman. If you're like disregarding the most absurd Supermans, Supermans, however you want to pluralize that, if you're just doing the average level animated series kind of Superman, then I think Goku would now beat him.
Okay. But then the other question was, which Dragon Ball villains could Superman beat? And my basic cutoff was, I think he could beat everyone through Perfect Cell. So all the way through Frieza. Obviously, Vegeta, when he first shows up, he's going to beat everyone in original Dragon Ball. He's going to beat Piccolo. I do think the first 3 cells he'd wipe the floor with. I think Perfect Cell with his regeneration and all his different powers might give him trouble, but I think he could still edge it out.
I think he would definitely beat all the cells.
Okay.
I don't have any problem with that.
I don't think he beats Majin Buu, if you go through all the different Majin Buus.
He definitely doesn't beat Majin Buu, because part of Majin Buu's powers come from magic, and Superman is weak to magic. And so Majin Buu's relationship to Bibbidi and Bobbidi, like, Superman has a specific vulnerability.
Oh, I did not know this.
Majin Buu. Yeah, so I think that is why Superman would lose in a fight against Majin Buu.
Interesting. Okay. And then for the Dragon Ball Super villains, I think he would struggle against most of them. I think he probably beats Golden Frieza, but that might be more of a fight.
I think he'd beat Golden Frieza. I think he'd beat Hit. I think Jiren, and like, he wouldn't be able to beat Beerus. He would not. I don't think he'd be able to beat Jiren. I think that's where he caps out.
Goku Black.
I think anybody below that.
Yeah.
Goku Black, I think it's more of a. I think that's more of a contest. I think Superman would still. Well, if you're doing merge Zamasu, like, Goku can't beat that, so Superman can't beat that level. But just like Super Saiyan Rose, Goku Black, I think Superman would still prevail. It would just be very difficult.
Interesting. Okay, so Very nerdy discussion, but it was on my mind, and listeners specifically asked for it. So there you go, Sean.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. And again, if you're doing Silver Age era Superman, nobody can defeat him. Beerus is wiped out. Jiren is wiped out. Like only Zeno-sama would be able to defeat that level Superman. Because they just didn't give a fuck. So they just were like, it's one of the best comic book panels ever is Superman just towing like so many planets that they just become like dots in the distance. It's so many on this big fucking chain in space. It's great.
My proposal, Sean, for the next Superman movie is you cast Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Superman and have him be Silver Age era Superman powers and just do that and make it funny. And I actually think that would be a great Superman movie.
Absolutely, yes. Let's just... we need to get as far away from like dark, gritty Superman as we can, and that is what Silver Age Superman is.
Wonderful. All right, so Sean, do you want to talk some video games?
Well, before we get to video games, Jonathan, we should talk about some news, because you guys did a podcast last week that I was not on, talking about the Nintendo Direct, and I listened to it while finishing up my Tall Geese, and I took one page of hastily scrawn notes in pen that I want to go over because there were some factual errors or missing information from that podcast that I thought I should correct.
I think this is good. You are our fact checker.
Okay. So number one, this is something that you did immediately correct yourself on, Jonathan, but I still want to make fun of you for it, is America and Japan are separated by the Pacific, not the Atlantic Ocean.
That's not even news. That's just me fucking up normal facts.
So this is news / corrections. Is what this section is. So just again, it's the Pacific, not the Atlantic Ocean. It separates America and Japan. My next note here says Terry Bogard rules. Hey, come on, are you okay, Buster Wolf? So that was probably my favorite part of the Nintendo Direct, was that video where they did the SNK characters and then ultimately landed on Terry. Was rad, even if it had basically leaked that there was going to be an SNK character, and if there was going to be an SNK character, it was going to be Terry Bogard, in the same way that if there was going to be a Street Fighter character, it's going to be Ryu kind of thing. So I knew basically that it was going to be Terry. It was still a really, really well put together video. Terry Bogard is super cool. I know that SNK is not quite well known over here, but people should just watch videos of Garo, Mark of the Wolves, or some of those later SNK games, because those late 90s, early 2000s sprite-based fighters like Garo, Mark of the Wolves, which is the last Fatal Fury game, and Street Fighter Third Strike, all that era of fighting games look so fucking gorgeous, because it's just the most ridiculously luxurious sprite-based animation, and there are so many frames of animation on just their idle poses and stuff. Terry Bogard is a good get. He's a good pick for Smash Brothers, and hopefully that means that a whole generation of people because SNK kind of went away for most of the 2000s. They just didn't I think their company had a lot of trouble, so they didn't put out a lot. So there's a lot of people who just aren't really aware of the SNK games. So hopefully this kind of brings a revival, because SNK has come back. They did King of Fighters 14 a couple years ago. They put out a new Samurai Showdown earlier this year, and so SNK is back. They're putting out games. SNK fighting games have really cool characters, and Terry is probably the coolest of them all. I just hope that they have a Garo Mark of the Wolves costume where he has his dope bomber jacket from that game, because he's very cool.
And I should say, like I said this on the podcast, but I agree, because I'm now very excited to check out some SNK games, and the Nintendo Switch has literally dozens and dozens of them, because they did this big push and got out almost every King of Fighters, every Fatal Fury, every Samurai Showdown, arcade and console ports. It's really cool. So
yeah, and that's a push that has happened on most of the consoles, because the whole situation was a couple of years ago. I think the company that owns SNK, it's kind of switched hands, and so there was a big push to do a bunch of ports of their old games, and so that's been happening across the board for this generation. So even if you don't have a Nintendo Switch, there are still a bunch of cool SNK games that you can play. My next note says, put Goku in Smash, you fuckers. This is outdated because we got another interview with Sakurai at TGS where Sakurai basically said, no, still, even though we're doing another Fighter's Pass, Goku's still not going to be in Smash Brothers, and I continue to not buy a Nintendo Switch. Weird how that works out. My next note just says Deadly Premonition is weird. This is the most bizarre thing that has happened in video games in a long time. You and Thomas had not ever heard, like, you did not.
I basically said, like,
I don't know what Deadly Premonition is. So have you done any research? Have you educated yourself, or do I have to do the Deadly Premonition?
You have to.
Do we have to have the Deadly Premonition talk? Okay.
Yeah.
So, Deadly Premonition is a budget horror title that came out on the Xbox 360 and PS3, and it was widely panned at release and slowly became something of a cult classic. The creative director was Swery65, who is kind of a beloved kind of cult figure in Japanese game development. He also released The Missing, which was a pretty well-received puzzle game. I think that came out last year, maybe 2 years ago. And basically, Deadly Premonition is a heavily Twin Peaks inspired horror game with a really weird tone, a really interesting set of characters. The main character, Francis York Morgan, who's basically the Dale Cooper of the game, in particular, is a really fun character who has a bunch of like interesting like kind of quirks, and he like in particular he does this thing where he's constantly talking to this like imaginary character or whatever it is. The story eventually explains like what this is, but he's talking to this character named Zach, and so he's just constantly kind of monologuing himself and talking to a Zach, which is effectively like a almost like player surrogate thing of like he's talking to the player, which Control actually does a very similar kind of thing, which is cool. And yeah, Deadly Premonition is just like a very weird game that the gameplay in it is basically terrible. I've not played it, but I did watch the Giant Bomb like endurance run kind of let's play series they did on it, so I have seen the whole game be played. And so it's just a very peculiar, weird kind of cult classic game that came out forever ago. And so them making a Deadly Premonition 2 is just utterly ridiculous and is not something I would have ever expected. But also for it to be announced in the most offhand way possible, where in the Nintendo Direct, because I watched through the whole Nintendo Direct. This is one of the ones that I watched the whole video because I thought it was very well paced. So I just kind of went through instead of just picking out the trailers. They just go into, and like the Deadly Premonition logo comes up, and you see Francis York Morgan, the main character. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, they're porting Deadly Premonition because they port that game onto everything because you might as well. And it's like, okay, yeah, cool, they're porting Deadly Premonition, which they are doing. They did announce that later, but the first video they showed was Deadly Premonition 2, and you don't realize it at first until the lower third pops up and tells you this is footage of Deadly Premonition 2, not just a port of 1, and you're like, what? Like, there's no commentary. Nobody says, like, there's, like, the guy from Nintendo doesn't say anything. They don't put Swery on the video. Like, there's nobody providing any commentary about how utterly bizarre it is that they're making a sequel to Deadly Premonition, which I think is Switch exclusive. And it's like, okay, I guess that just happened. I need someone to give me context. Because especially, it's the kind of thing where when you just drop an announcement like that, there's a couple of hours afterwards where everybody is utterly befuddled on the internet about, like, who is making this game? Is Swery involved? And I think he is, but his company is not. So he's, like, working, because Swery owns, like, his own indie game studio now. But I guess he's also working and directing this sequel to Deadly Premonition with some whole, like, totally other studio. And it's, like, a very, like, weird, haphazard way to just drop what is, for a certain section of the audience, an incredibly massive bombshell on them. Like, if you're someone who really likes Deadly Premonition, you really, really like Deadly Premonition. So the idea that they're making a sequel to that game is basically like them making a third season of Twin Peaks. And you're just like, fucking what? Like, okay, I guess this is happening now. Oh, shit, okay.
That's wild. I had detected that some people were excited, but that was the most baffling thing I've ever seen at a Nintendo Direct, I have to say. I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, they provided no context for it, as if it was a game that, like, everyone is just supposed to know. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, of course, the Deadly Premonition 2. It's like, no, somebody needs to say something about this game. You can't just put footage of it on your fucking Nintendo Direct. Alright, moving on. My next note, this is a quote of something you said, Jonathan. I think this is when you were talking about the different Doom ports, because they're putting Doom 64 out on the Switch, and you said, and I quote, "The SNES had the best sound chip," and underneath that I say, "If you're a lame-o, Genesis is too cool for school."
The Super NES, this is not even debatable that the Super NES had the better sound chip. That's just...
The Super NES had the most technically capable sound chip of providing a diverse range of sounds. If the sounds you want to listen to sound like they're playing in a fucking swimming pool, like if you want this dull, muted fucking bullshit sound chip, if you want the raw, fucking just crystal clear, face-melting rad tunes, you gotta go to the Yamaha chip on the Genesis.
Sure, like the 5 good Genesis games that have really cool music. Yeah.
Sega Genesis is better than the Super Nintendo, and its
No, it's
chip
not.
is too. Especially, the fucking Super Nintendo couldn't handle 1/5 of the fucking just energy in the Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack.
Donkey Kong Country,
can't do it.
Super Metroid. There are so many games. The level of atmospherics that the Super Nintendo can create is still ahead of its time. It's amazing.
Those games have really good soundtracks, but they're not Streets of Rage fucking 2. They're not fucking Sonic 3. They don't just get into your bones and shake your whole body with the power of fucking music. Like, if you played X-Men 2 The Clone Wars on Super Nintendo, you'd get to the late title card where it goes, and you'd be like, oh, that's okay. In Genesis, if your fucking eyes pop out of your fucking skull, because it's so rad. Moving on.
You have
Point
strong
made.
feelings about this.
It's very good. The Super Nintendo sound chip is fine, but it doesn't have the personality of the Genesis sound chip. It just sounds like chip tunes. Genesis sound chip has like there's a thing to it.
Final Fantasy 3, Chrono Trigger. You just can't.
Those are great. They have great. There's a difference between a great soundtrack and a great sound chip. You fucking tune the music to the Genesis sound chip, and it sounds unlike anything else. Like, you put the soundtracks for Super Nintendo games and you recompose them and do different stuff with them and they sound way better. The best version of the Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack is the one playing through the Genesis sound chip. Matter settled. Moving on. My next note here, this is another quote from you. Jedi Knight 2 has the, quote, original PS2 graphics. I found it very funny when you said that, because the PS2 is actually the only console from that generation Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast did not come out on.
I have no idea what it was actually. What was it on? Was it an Xbox game?
Yeah, it was original Xbox, GameCube, and PC. For whatever reason, it never came out on PS2. I do not know why that happened.
Given that I have never played that game, it was a good guess to say I knew the era. Let me guess the most popular console of that era. So
yes. It should have come out on the PS2. I do not know why, but it never did.
And that is the game. You really like that one, Sean, right? We were talking about this.
Yes, yeah. I'll wrap back around on Jedi Knight after I make fun of you for another thing you said that was wrong. Because shortly after that, you said, quote, Jedi Knight 1 is coming out early next year, which is just blatantly not true. They're putting out Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, which I can tell why you think Jedi Knight Jedi Academy would be the first game and Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast would be the second game, but Jedi Knight Jedi Academy is the game that came out after Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast.
This is not my fault. This is just dumb marketing.
I'll go back around to it. So my notes, I put those quotes, and then I said, the fuck you talking about? And then another quote, which is, quote, both Jedi Knight games, and there are arguably 4 Jedi Knight games, and only 2 of them are coming out on Switch and other platforms. They're kind of coming out wide. They're being ported by the same people that ported the Mac version of the game from forever ago, and which is weird. Like, I'm not sure. Someone needs to do some reporting on why this is happening now. If there's like a push from Disney maybe that's starting, that Disney maybe is wanting to get these games ported, or if that like company just sort of has some, like, their contract allows them some matter of autonomy in porting the games. I have no idea. Anyways, for the name stuff, So the first game in the Jedi Knight series is Star Wars Dark Forces, which was a Doom-style first-person shooter from the 90s.
It doesn't have Jedi Knight in the name, and I'm supposed to know that it's a Jedi Knight game?
I knew that. I mean, I played all these games, but I knew it. Because that's the game where Kyle Katarn comes from. That's the game that is the story of... Well, part of it is Kyle Katarn going and getting the Death Star plans, which is what they decided to make a movie that retconned that called Rogue One, which is not as good as Star Wars Dark Forces. And so that's where that happens. That's kind of the first part of that game. Then in the late 90s, they made a sequel to Dark Forces called Star Wars Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. That's kind of a Half-Life 1 era first-person shooter that's very good. It's aged pretty well. And that's where Kyle Katarn learns that his dad was a Jedi, and he gets a lightsaber and learns how to use the Force. He fights the Dark Jedi Jarek, which is the good character, and that game also has very good bad 90s live-action FMV cutscenes in it. So if you want to have a good fun time, look up the cutscenes for Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight on YouTube, because they're very funny.
So this...
Then in the early... Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So this series did a full-on Rambo, where the series had one title. Mm-hmm. The sequel was correct in that it's like Rambo First Blood Part 2, and this was something 2 Jedi Knight. And then it went full Jedi Knight 2, just as the next one was just Rambo 3. It did that?
Exactly, yes.
Oh, well, so how the hell did I never figure it out, Sean?
I don't know. You know the titles of the Rambo movies. Why don't you know?
I've seen the Rambo movies. I have not played obscure Star Wars games from the 90s.
Well, maybe you should have done your research before you talked about it on a podcast that you knew I might listen to. So in the early 2000s, Raven Software developed Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast. The first two games were developed by LucasArts. And Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, that's the first one of the games that is coming out on modern consoles in very soon. It's coming out
September 24th.
Yeah, which is Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast is a great, great game. I'm very curious to see what the ports are going to be like, because to me, that is a very PC first kind of game, because I did play it originally on the GameCube, but I really fell in love with that game when I played it on PC, mostly because when you play it on console, you had to select your force powers from a linear menu that would just pop up, and you just have to tap through one after the other for your force powers. So it basically meant that you kind of stuck to whichever, if you wanted to, you were using force push a lot, you just kind of left that on and you didn't switch powers much. When you played on PC, you could just assign all the force powers to different keys, whichever key you wanted. So that meant that you could fully use the full range of the abilities available to the character simultaneously. And so you could use force choke to lift someone up into the air and then push them off of a cliff or whatever. And in the console versions, that wasn't really possible. So I'm curious if they're going to implement a radial menu or something like that for the console ports, which would alleviate a lot of that issue. I am skeptical that they would do that kind of work, but that's something I think needs to be done for that game. Also, the console versions of those games never allowed you to extinguish your lightsaber once it turned on, which is something you can do on the PC by just pressing the 1 key. And so as soon as your lightsaber ignites at some point in the level, it is on for the entire level. And so if you are a fan of playing a video game and having the in your noise the entire time, then the console versions are for you. It was surprisingly game-changing to have the ability to just be oh no, I'm ready to turn my lightsaber off, and just have the hilt there, which was good. So if people are very interested in playing these games, unless you just really want the portability, I would still recommend buying the PC or Mac version, because the Mac port is also very good.
I would assume
because anything can run those games. Any modern computer, laptop, anything would be able to run these games.
We will know soon enough. We'll know next week, or the week after that, September 24th. My guess would be that this is probably based more on the PC version at this point in time than it would be the original console versions, especially if this is the company that did the Mac port, and given that the similarity between PC architecture and consoles, it's become so much more similar this generation. So we'll see, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the problem is that you it being based on the PC port doesn't that doesn't mean anything, because if they do that, they have to implement things to solve those problems anyways, right? So the PC is uniquely equipped for handling that game, or the game was designed for it with PC in mind because it was designed for you to have access to a number of buttons that the controller can't do. And so that's kind of my point, that they need to come up with solutions. And the original console ports have solutions, they're just very imperfect. So that's why I suspect it's probably going to be basically what the console ports do. Because on the PC, you can still do the thing with like the menu for the force powers. Like if you wanted to, you could just hit, I think it was like Z or X by default, and scroll through the force powers linearly. It just never made sense on the PC. You just assign them to a key. So that's my guess. Like, ideally, these games would get updated enough for them to run, not to run well, but for them to play well on modern consoles in a control sense, in a way that I am skeptical that this company is going to put in the work to do that. My guess is they're probably just going to want to put out fairly pared down ports. But then early next year, they're also going to put out Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, which is the last game in the series, which is also kind of like a spin-off. Because you don't play as Kyle, you play as Jaden Core, who's a kind of created character who is Kyle's Padawan. And that game is really fun. I like it a lot. And interestingly, they're bringing the multiplayer for Jedi Academy over, but not the multiplayer for Jedi Outcast, which makes sense because Jedi Academy had a very vibrant multiplayer scene on the PC, which was partially motivated by mods. So a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'm going to get back into Jedi Academy multiplayer, I think are probably going to be a little bit disappointed when you just play vanilla Jedi Academy. The multiplayer is not as good, but some of that modding scene is like extremely vibrant and has been like doing cool stuff with that game for the past like 15 years, basically. But yeah, those Jedi Knight games are very, very good, and I do wish that they would do the proper titling scheme for those games and have it be Star Wars Dark Forces, Star Wars Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, Star Wars Dark Forces 3, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, Star Wars Dark Forces 4, Jedi Knight 3, Jedi Outcast 2, Jedi Academy. If they did that, then this confusion would all be cleared up, and we wouldn't have to have these kinds of conversations.
Not confusing at all, no.
Not confusing at all. All right, I only have a couple more notes. My next note is a quote. This is, I think, when you guys are still talking about Star Wars, and Thomas said something. He said, quote, EA will do anything for money. I think they're just talking about maybe they would put out a Battlefront 2 port, or the classic Battlefront 2. And I said, if this were true, we'd have our fucking Mass Effect collection by now.
Yeah.
Because how have we gone through an entire generation of consoles and EA has not put Mass Effect on fucking anything? It's ridiculous. What the fuck are they doing, Jonathan?
I mean, all of the BioWare games, like KOTOR isn't on modern consoles. KOTOR is it's on iPhones and stuff, which is weird, but it's not on PS4, Switch, Xbox. I mean, you can play it on Xbox One because of the original Xbox version. But yeah, like it's very weird with all the BioWare games that none of them have come forward. And Mass Effect, that would be such a slam dunk. There are a million studios that are really good at porting PS3 era games. You give it to one of them, they take a year, they put it out. You could probably you could get it on Switch. You could put it everywhere.
Easily.
Yeah. It's like utterly bizarre that it's not out.
Yeah, EA has such a rich back catalog, particularly from even just the last generation of consoles. They fucking hit it out of the park with stuff like Dead Space and Mass Effect, and like Dragon Age Origins. Like, all those games are rad, and they just have been siloed off. In every other studio, like Ubisoft announces a new port of some random game that you like, Assassin's Creed Rogue, that you kind of forgot existed, but it's like, okay, yeah, cool, fucking port it. Yeah, bring it to everything. Assassin's Creed Rogue is available on 7 platforms or something at this point. Great, perfect, do it. EA doesn't do anything, and it drives me nuts because I love so many of their games from the last generation. It pisses me off, and I wish EA would do anything for money. You'd think that they would. It was clear that you'd make a profit on a Dead Space collection or a Mass Effect collection or classic Star Wars games collections like KOTOR and Battlefront 2, and they just don't do it. It annoys me. Next up is, for me, probably the most inconsequential of all these, but the thing I find the most hilarious, which is Devil May Cry 2 is coming to the Switch.
Yeah.
They're on its own.
Well,
Devil May Cry 2 for $20.
Oh, I didn't know the price point. I mean, because they did Devil May Cry
for $20.
Because they did Devil May Cry 1 at E3, so they are clearly going through the collection. They're just putting them out separately. So that is weird that it's coming out on its own for... I thought it would be like $10. That's wild.
Nope. Yeah, so for context, these are the same versions as the HD collection, which is the ports of those games to the 360 and PS3 that they then also ported to Xbox One and PS4. And so these are the versions of the games I played earlier this year. And they're good HD updates of these games. The collection is like for full price $30 on the PS4 and Xbox One. But it's always on. I got it for like $10 or something. It's always on sale. So they're and all of them come together. Like they have never been separately packaged, other than when they're doing it on the Switch. And it just feels like Capcom is like exploiting the Switch audience in a weird way of like, let's put out the Devil May Cry 1 on its own for $20. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't just wait to do the full collection for the same price it is on other platforms. But they're going to do Devil May Cry 1 for $20. Eventually, they'll get to Devil May Cry 3 for $20, which maybe Devil May Cry 3 would be worth $20. It's still gouging you, but like that game is so good. If you really wanted to play it portably, I would still pay that price because I like it so much. But the sheer thought of somebody buying Devil May Cry 2 in 2019 for $20 fucking dollars. This is a game that I played to completion in 3.5 hours on my first time through. Like, sight unseen, knowing nothing about the game, only having just played the first game and then playing 2, and I beat it in 3.5 hours. It does have a second playable character. So if that goes through basically the same levels and plays almost identically, like this plays a little bit differently. So you could, if you wanted to 100% the game, you could play it for about 7 hours. But then you'd also be playing 7 hours of Devil May Cry 2, the easiest, most boring fucking character action game you will ever play. Like, there's nothing offensively bad about Devil May Cry 2. It's just so dull the entire way through. And it's also a game that every other Devil May Cry game has completely 100% ignored, to the point where the other playable character from Devil May Cry 2 has never appeared in any other Devil May Cry media ever. So it's the most like black sheep, nothing entry in a franchise you could possibly pick out in the history of video games. And they're selling it on its own for $20. Like, it's so mind-boggling to me that they're doing that. Nobody is going to buy this game on its own. The only way you're selling Devil May Cry 2 to people is if you put it in with the other games. And it's like, if I'm paying $30 for Devil May Cry and Devil May Cry 3, sure, I'll take Devil May Cry 2. Like, just give it to me also. I'm fine with that. Someone buying it on their own is hilarious. But even if you skip Devil May Cry 2 and you only buy 1 and 3, it will still be $10 more expensive than the HD collection on other consoles. And that's ridiculous. And it's dumb. Like, I don't like that they're doing that. I don't like that they're, like, gouging the Switch audience for whatever reason.
Which is weird, because, Capcom has mostly not done this. They also, because they've put out a bunch of stuff lately. Capcom's been pretty good about getting their back catalog out with all the Mega Mans and things like that. And they have not had price disparities on those. They did this also on Resident Evil 4, 5, 6 when those came out. And the Revelations collection or whatever. Those were all priced $10 higher than the PS4 and Xbox One versions for no apparent reason. And not like $10 higher than they are now, just $10 higher than they've ever been sold on PS4. And they didn't add anything Switch exclusive. Like, they didn't add the motion controls into Resident Evil 4, which would have been cool for Switch because there was Resident Evil 4 on Wii. It's just the PS4 version, but $30 instead of $20. So yeah, I mean, you know, Nintendo fans are rabid, I guess, and they'll pay money, so Capcom feels like they can do it. But it is a weird, shitty move from Capcom.
Yeah. And just nobody's going to buy, like, only someone who gets duped is going to buy Devil May Cry 2 on its own. It's hilarious and dumb. And then my last note, I legitimately do not remember what the context of this was, but I just wrote this last sentence, Thomas probably isn't worthless. I don't remember what that came from.
Okay, Thomas isn't worthless, I want to say right off the bat. But okay. I was trying to outro the podcast and, like, end the show, and I was just doing I was like, this was episode 298.5, because I don't do full numbered episodes unless both Sean and I are here. I'm the right, 0.5, yes. Sean's the other 0.5, and I lost my train of thought, and I said something like, I guess, Thomas, that makes you a 0.0, and then he said, hey, and he sounded really hurt, and he's like, you know 0.0 just means 0, are you saying I'm worthless? And I'm like, I didn't mean to say that. So yeah, Thomas, you're not worthless. I apologized in the moment. I apologize again. I think I apologized to him midway through last week. Yeah, that's what happens when I go off script, totally forget what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, you're probably not worthless, Thomas. That was so important that I made a note of it. Because Thomas didn't say anything just sort of like categorically wrong the way that you did multiple times, Jonathan. He only made a statement that I sort of disagreed with in regards to EA, but I understood where he was coming from.
Oh yeah, if you just casually were to say EA will do anything for $1 after like thinking about the microtransaction scandals, that people would understand that statement. You just have to interrogate it a little more and be like, well, they'll do anything seemingly very easy for $1. But then it'll fuck them over.
Yes, yeah, they'll only go to a certain extent, and then past a certain amount of effort, they're like, well, we can't just sort of like financially exploit like a vulnerable audience by putting in a bunch of loot boxes. So let's not go there. We'd actually have to put like effort and really commit people to this.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah, that's my recap of the news of the Switch Direct and what I wanted to my input of the parts that I was missing for.
Well, thank you, Sean. I'm actually really happy we did it this way, because I think me doing an episode with Thomas and then you coming in a week later and doing corrections from handwritten notes is way more entertaining than if you and I had just done it like we normally do.
Yeah, because I don't have anything to say about like Luigi's Mansion 3 or Pokemon. Like we've talked about those games at E3 and stuff, so I get to kind of skip the announcements that I'm not personally interested in and only talk about the stuff that I care about and get to make fun of you in the process. So I think it's a win-win.
All right. Well, there you go. Sean, do you want to move on and talk about some video games we've been playing?
Yeah, let's talk about the video games of the day, Jonathan.
Well, why don't I go first, since you just did a big segment there, and we can also transition out of the Nintendo Switch into the Nintendo Switch, which is Astral Chain, which is the game I've been playing. Big recent Nintendo Switch exclusive, and Sean, I have to say, the game I am most certain of the Nintendo Switch exclusives that I think you would really like. If you owned a Switch, this is the Switch exclusive that I would recommend to you most highly. So, if you haven't heard, Astral Chain is the latest game from Platinum Games. They are famous for... they were founded by the guy who did Devil May Cry, right? He's the lead...
Yes.
What's his name?
Yeah, the original Devil May Cry. Shinji Mikami.
Yeah, Shinji Mikami. I don't know if he founded it, but he's like one of the lead artists there. He obviously did Bayonetta 2. Those are probably their two most famous just of the Platinum games. They also did... They've bounced around a lot because they make very weird, very out there action games, and for a while they were kind of clearly, I don't want to say struggling, but they were, I think, struggling to find a big hit. So they did things like Bayonetta 1, which was a cult favorite, but not a big hit. They were able to do Bayonetta 2 because it was a Wii U exclusive. Nothing on the Wii U was a hit, so there you go there.
Yeah.
But again, beloved game. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, which was that Metal Gear spin-off that also was not a hit, but definitely has a big cult following now. There are a lot of people who think that's a great Metal Gear game. I was so enamored with Astral Chain, Sean. I was at a game store and I found Metal Gear Rising for $5, and I did buy it because I would like to play that one day. It's probably better than the other Metal Gears.
Yeah, I own a copy of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. I bought it back when we did our Metal Gear Solid stuff.
Yeah.
Around 5, I bought it, and I just have not gotten around to playing it. I know it's right behind me. I know exactly where it is, and every other month I walk past it. I'm like, fuck, I should hook up a 360 and play this game, and then I forget about it.
And it is on the Xbox One back compat. That's why I bought it. So if you have an Xbox One, you can play it on there. But anyway, they did that. And then they really broke big in terms of, I think we would say, commercial success and public consciousness with Nier Automata.
Yes.
Your favorite game of all time.
Yeah, the best game ever made.
Yeah, Yoko Taro's wild and very, very weird masterpiece from is that a 2016 game or 2017?
2016.
Okay, so yeah, but Nier Automata, you love it more than me, but obviously we both agree it's a phenomenal game, and that was a big, big thing for Platinum Games, because Nier Automata, in addition to being one of the weirdest AAA games of all time, was a huge hit, which Platinum had never had before. So Nier Automata...
Yeah, it sold a couple million copies, which is very unusual for a game of that scope and style.
Yeah. So Nier Automata is a big hit. It's a little bit of a departure for Platinum Games because Yoko Taro is not a member of Platinum Games. He basically came in as director and Platinum, and he led a team at Platinum to make it. So a couple years have gone by. Platinum has been working on several different things. Astral Chain is the first game they've had out since Nier Automata. And this is the same team that made Nier Automata. Obviously, Yoko Taro did not work on this game. Yoko Taro is off probably meditating on a mountaintop. What do you think Yoko Taro's up to, Sean?
Oh, I don't think we should think about it. I don't know. He's in another plane of existence.
He is dropping more acid than we thought humanly possible.
Yeah, or he's just sort of like sitting alone in a room eating ramen. Like one of those two. He's either like navigating the astral plane or he's just eating some delicious ramen.
Why can't it be both?
Or both.
Yeah. There you go. But anyway, so Yoko Taro did not work on this, but pretty much everyone else involved in the game, at least a bunch of the leads, like the director of this game, whose name I'm forgetting, I'll look it up here, was the game design lead on Nier Automata. It's not the same composer, it's a different composer, although you can definitely tell it's a similar style of music. Yeah, the director of Astral Chain was Takahisa Taura, who was the game designer lead on Astral Chain. Yeah, so a lot of familiar names, and definitely there are some familiar stylistic elements here, like it uses the exact same typeface as the English release of Nier Automata, which I very much enjoyed, and there are absolutely moments throughout that you can tell Yoko Taro rubbed off on these people. Like, there are multiple junctures in the story, Sean, where it sits you in front of a series of police files on a computer, and you read through those and get, like, first-person accounts of things, and that's how they fill in story details, and I'm like, this is scratching the Nier Automata itch for me right now, because Yoko Taro liked to do that at several junctures in Nier Automata, and it obviously follows the Platinum Games tradition of being pretty off-kilter. It is very, shall we say, expressionistic, which is to say it is very flamboyant and an explosion of style and color. It is a third-person action game with a really unique action system, but it also, and this also reminded me of Nier Automata, it is very willing to just experiment with game genre at different points. So, like, there might be a mini-game where they just create this kind of ad hoc puzzle game with you and your cool Legion monster having to move around trucks and figure out a path for them, and it does it as an over-the-top, like moving puzzle game, and there's things like that. Or they do a lot of little departures like that, where they just will have a fun one-off that reminds me of some of the experimentation that past Platinum games have done. So definitely, you know a Platinum game when you see it. They are extremely unique. And I have to say, Sean, Nier Automata, one of the best games of the last few years, certainly one of the most memorable. Astral Chain, easily my favorite game I've played to completion in 2019. 2019 has been, I think, not the most rich year for video games in recent memory. There's definitely been some huge standouts, and I say to completion because I've got a giant asterisk around Sekiro because I have not finished that game, because it's too hard, but I want to go back to it. And if I were able to beat that, it might be my number one. But of the ones I've played first time, I think Astral Chain is just, it's so unique. It is so delightful. It's got such a good heart underneath it. It's such a technical showcase for the Nintendo Switch. And again, it's just, there's no one else makes games like Platinum Games. There's just such an original signature to them that, it really does make me want to go back and play a lot of their back catalog. I have Bayonetta 1 and 2 on Switch, but I haven't played those yet, and now I really, really want to, because there's just something when you find a developer who has such a unique identity. It's so fun, because it's always nice when you see something that's like, this doesn't feel like anything else I've gone out and played, and Astral Chain definitely has that feeling. The setup of Astral Chain is that it's the near future it's the near future, but it would have to be on a very alternate Earth. It's kind of a Blade Runner-y future in terms of these, mega cities with a lot of sort of Asian or Eastern Western kind of melded influences, and all of humanity has gone to this big island on the ocean, this constructed island called the Ark, because humanity has been overrun by dimensional portals where these big monsters they call chimeras are coming out of dimensional portals and killing all the people, and so they all flee to the Ark, and there is a doctor named Yosef who has figured out a way to capture the chimeras and use them to fight the chimeras, and this is the Astral Chain system, where he is able to chain the beasts from these other dimensions, and then the police officers can use those beasts. They call them legions, and so you are This game actually does the same thing that Assassin's Creed Odyssey did, where you can pick a male or female protagonist, but they're both characters in the story. And specifically in this story, they are twin brother and sister. And I really love how this is handled in the game. I would actually recommend pick the gender you want based on the character you want to see in the story less, because the one you don't pick is a really major figure in the story, and they're a really cool character, and they're really they are the other most major character in the game. So it's really cool. I picked the male protagonist, and so I got the female protagonist as the other main character, and she's just I loved the vocal performance. I think it's Brianna Knickerbocker, and it's just a really cool character design, and she's a cool character. Either way, your twin is named Akira, which I liked because it's kind of a general neutral name enough that they're both named Akira. And so, yeah, so that's your setup, and you basically are the son and daughter of the captain of, the police force, and the captain of the section of the police force called Neuron, which does all the stuff with the legions to fight the chimeras. It's a fairly complicated plot setup. But you are their son and daughter. You join the Neuron task force at the beginning of the game, and through a series of events, you become the only person who can control all the different legions. And so you become the person who, through your astral chain, is controlling the legions. And this leads to a very, very unique battle system where you, as the human, have a weapon called the X baton, which is this really cool baton that, it can be a normal police baton, it can turn into a gun, it can turn into a giant fucking Final Fantasy sword, and it does all this stuff. And you can fight the beasts that way, but then you can summon your legion, and your legion comes out and is pretty much fully controllable as well, and you fight with both of them at the same time, using the left thumbstick to control your character and the right thumbstick to control the Legion. And you can do things like drawing shapes with the Legion's chain that will create certain attacks. This, as I understand it, is based kind of on another Platinum game, the Wonderful 101 for Wii U, where you literally drew on the gamepad. This one, you're not drawing, you're just moving in a certain direction, but you can do things like wrap the chain around the enemy and they will be stunned for a couple seconds and locked down by the chain. You move your Legion towards an enemy and they will start auto-attacking. You can do lots of different commands. It is a insanely detailed action system that is, I would say, it falls into that very nice sweet spot of easy to learn, hard to master. There's a lot of depth to it, but I think they ease you into it at a good clip, and it is surprisingly manageable for 99% of the game. I'll maybe talk about the last boss, which is a ludicrous difficulty spike, but other than that, you don't, at least on the normal difficulty, which I was playing at what they call Platinum Standard, which is the highest you can do a first run at, and then you unlock a higher difficulty. I felt like the battle system was manageable, and I had a lot of options to tackle all the different crazy scenarios they put you at, because this is definitely one of the Platinum games where they will send, dozens of enemies at you at once, and you will have to do a lot of chaotic battling to fight them. But it's a really unique combat system, and the game does not rely on it all the time. And another thing I think they very clearly took from Nier Automata, there's a lot of because my understanding is something like Bayonetta is just a series of linear levels where combat is pretty much everything you're doing. And Nier Automata obviously was a pseudo open world game where you went out in the world and you had missions and you had side quests, and you could spend hours in Nier Automata just talking to people and doing little side quests without ever fighting. And it's kind of the same in Astral Chain. Astral Chain does not have an open world. It does have a series of levels. There are 11 main chapters, and each chapter has a series of sort of locations you're in that are linear, but in those locations there's a lot of freedom to go around and explore and find all the collectibles and do all of the side quests and all those things. And the general rhythm of the game is that you start out at police headquarters, you explore police headquarters and talk to people and see if there's anything you need to clean up there, get ready for your mission. You go out into the main mission area, and you are investigating a crime scene because you're a cop, and so you talk to people, you collect clues. There's a little system where it does the code word thing, and you put those in your journal, and you collect the code words, and you listen to people, but then a lot of people have problems you'll help solve, and some of them are you'll run over to the astral plane and do some big fighting, but a lot of it is hey, my cat disappeared, can you go find my cat? And you'll pick up some cans off the ground, so you can throw the can, and the cat will be distracted, and then you go grab the cat. And there's just a lot of little helping people moments like that. There's a lot of I think, nice, understated humanity to the game that feels like there's a lot of mundanity. And that is another place where I feel like Nier Automata kind of rubbed off on them, where there's just an embrace of little mundane moments, or things like, just talking about picking up cans, there's a rating you have throughout the game of like your police score of how good a cop you are. If you run around the city and just pick up cans off the ground that people have thrown away and then walk over to a trash can, you'll get 10 cop points for just throwing each one in the trash cans. And there's just little details like that that I fucking love. And so it took me about 25 hours to beat the game in total, and that seems like it's quite a bit longer than a lot of people, and that's because I really did strive to do everything I could do. You can't do everything on a first playthrough, because you have to go back through with your all of your legions to unlock certain areas, but I did pretty much everything I could, and the game is so much more fun that way if you just poke around every corner, talk to everybody, see... Because the story itself is a little thin and not the best video game story I've seen. It's fine. I liked it a lot. What's fun is the world building, the visuals, all the different NPCs you can talk to, all the little side quests, and like I said, you have the stage in the police headquarters, the stage where you're kind of exploring the world, and then you obviously get into more battle scenarios where you are solving environmental puzzles with your legions. You'll usually travel to the astral plane where you will fight a bunch of chimeras, and then, each chapter will culminate usually in a big boss fight. It seems more formulaic than I think it is in the early chapters, so if you're a little frustrated with kind of the wash, rinse, repeat of like chapters 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, it starts to break up the formula later on, and I actually think this is a game that gets significantly stronger the more it goes along. I liked it the whole way through. I liked it at the beginning. I thought it made a strong first impression. I really started realizing how much I loved the game in the second half, when it really starts to branch out and do a lot of different things, and I think it just lets you linger in the world in a lot of interesting ways. And then the combat, I just think, gets better the more tools you have and the more they throw at you. Another thing I would compare to Nier Automata, where Nier Automata, I found the combat kind of boring, like in the first main run, and then the more you play the game and the more crazy shit they start throwing at you, the better the combat in Nier Automata becomes. It's the same thing in Astral Chain. So, yeah, I love all of that about the game. I think it is a significant feat of world building. It is such a cool world to exist in. I love all of that. And then on a technical level, it cannot be overstated. I cannot believe this fucking game is running on Nintendo Switch. It's insane to me. Like, it's obviously not a full-fledged PS4 game or anything, but it looks significantly more advanced than any other Switch exclusive I could point to in terms of all the things they are doing with lighting effects and environments and the sheer amount of shit going on in the battles. The frame rate is not perfect. There are moments in the second half where it will falter a little bit, but honestly, it's pretty rock solid for the whole game, and there are moments where that blew me away because there's just so much going on visually in this game. I was consistently impressed with it. It's one of the Switch's best technical achievements. I think it's an incredibly just fun game to play. You can't overstate the fun factor. And then I liked the story and characters and world. It's got a phenomenal soundtrack that does a lot of the same kind of layered stuff that Nier Automata does. I really, really liked this game, and I hope people pick it up. It seems like it's doing very well, but it is definitely Platinum being Platinum. Feels like they are evolving from some of their past games and taking in things that have worked about different games and moving forward. And I also think it's pretty clear Platinum and Nintendo are a good fit for each other, because Nintendo kind of is in a space where they can very much encourage them to do their big, weird swing and hit experiments, and there's an audience for that on these systems. So I'm really happy with it. I think it's a wonderful game.
Awesome. That all sounds great. Yeah, it is cool seeing like Platinum as the developer like finding themselves, because it was that thing where early on it felt like they like when Mikami kind of helped found that studio, they had a couple of like really big, like, well, not like massive huge commercial successes. Like Bayonetta was still a hit, particularly for like it was a new studio's first game and had like such a clear sense of identity. And then there was like a middle period where they kept putting out stuff like they put out like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game and a game based on Legend of Korra, the Avatar series. Like there's a bunch of like smaller licensed games, and most of those were not particularly well received. And it kind of feels like Platinum has kind of like come back up, and instead of, it feels like that studio has found itself again focusing on big, cool, interesting projects instead of doing lots of smaller projects, which they were doing for several years. And so, yeah, stuff like this and Nier Automata, and eventually whenever Bayonetta 3 comes up again, it's cool to see Platinum find themselves, because some of those early Platinum games, like Bayonetta 1, I would also, I'm not sure if it's on anything other than PS3. I think maybe they put it on PC, but you should play Vanquish, which is basically Platinum Games' like, imagine Platinum making a Gears of War game. That's basically what Vanquish is. It's so fucking good. It's amazing. It's one of the best third-person shooters ever made just for the combat. So yeah, it's cool to see like Platinum finding themselves and then also expanding out their palette through, like, you know, as you say, kind of taking some of those open world, like pseudo open world ideas from Nier Automata and like the mundanity, and kind of building out more instead of just having like the very kind of arena fight character action stuff, which is more where their roots are. It's just very satisfying to know that Platinum is continuing to be successful, because they are in a industry that feels like it's getting steadily more and more homogenized. It's really good to have those handful of studios that are putting out what are AAA games but are able to be their own thing.
Absolutely. Vanquish, by the way, was on 360, PS3, and it is also on Windows as of 2017.
Okay, yeah, so they did port it to PC.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and I think, you know, talking about the sort of arena combat thing and building beyond that, I love the pace in Astral Chain, because it really is like when you get into those big arena fights, you get to focus on it, and they are incredibly fun and rewarding. And there is one chapter in particular, I think it's chapter 7 or 8, that is one of the longest sustained stretches of fighting, and I had such a blast. It is such propulsive fun, but I think the game never keeps you in there for too long. And when it comes out and sends you to do other stuff, it's very different. There are long stretches of this game where you don't have to do any combat, and you're using all of those Legion abilities to do things like literally solve puzzles. Like, you cannot jump. There is no jump button in this game, but you do still get across obstacles and do some sort of platforming-esque stuff, because you can, like, send your legions chain across a chasm and then do your, like, chain jump across the chasm with them and things like that. And that's so creative, and just exploring the city and doing all the weird little mini games they have built in there. Or sometimes just, I really liked the cast of characters in this game. That my favorite character in a game this year, I think, is a character at the police station named Marie, who also cosplays as the, like, mascot of the police station called Lappy the big dog. And she's voiced by, in English, Cassandra Lee Morris, who did Morgana in Persona 5, and it is just, even if you're not going to play this game, look up some clips of her doing Lappy. It is the funniest voice acting for a video game I feel like I've heard in years. I was howling with laughter at all of her Lappy stuff, and all the Lappy stuff is just so weird and kind of out of left field, and I love it. I love that this game never takes itself too seriously and can just have some crazy fun, and then also in the last half go anime as ever living fuck with its story, and like some of the crazy dimensional portal shit they do, and the revelation of the true villain. Like, it is so anime as fuck, and it just knows what it is, and I kind of loved that about it. It's great, and I can't wait for whatever Platinum does next. They have a ton in development, because we know they're doing Bayonetta 3. We also know this game was at E3 several years ago, Babylon's Fall. It's supposed to be It's supposed to be a PS4, Xbox One game. We haven't heard any more about it. It was supposed to come out this year. It's clearly not coming out this year. I'm very curious what was made of that game. They were also the people doing Scalebound at one point. So they've had a lot on their plate. I'm curious where exactly they go from here. Like I said, between this and Bayonetta 3, I wouldn't be surprised if they become sort of increasingly simpatico with Nintendo, just because it feels like a pretty natural space for them to be in. But we'll see. I hope they're on everything. I hope they do lots of more stuff. My brother and I were just saying, it's kind of weird with all the Nintendo Switch ports that we haven't heard a Nier Automata port yet for Switch, just because that would seem like such a natural fit at this point, and would be a bigger technical challenge than Astral Chain. But if you can do Witcher 3, you can do Nier Automata.
Yeah, I think they could get Nier Automata onto the Switch. I think that would just, like, I mean, it took them a long time to port it to the Xbox One. So
yeah. So
hopefully they'll get around to it, because that game should be out on everything, because it's the best game anyone's ever made. So
yeah, so
but make as many people be able to play it as possible.
And I'm a little, I don't want to make too many Nier Automata comparisons, because this game is not Nier Automata, and that is an unfair standard to hold it to. It certainly does not have the narrative or thematic aspirations of Nier Automata. Nier Automata is a weird postmodern treatise on everything. I don't know how you would even
yes,
right?
Like identity and tragedy. Yeah.
Astral Chain is not trying to be that. It's trying to be a fun anime with cool monsters and stuff, and you have to know what you're going for. This is not Nier Automata. This is not a Yoko Taro game. But I do think if you liked certainly the gameplay and world building aspects of Nier Automata, you will see a lot of DNA in this. But just know that the Nier Automata identity is not exactly the Platinum Games identity for very obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And not every game could be Nier Automata. If I were the people who made Nier Automata and I was going to make another game, I think I would want to make something lighter and more fun and silly, right? Because Nier Automata was probably very stressful to make.
Yeah, it's you don't want to make another game where you spend hours discussing the nature of suicide for robotic beings. It's just you can't do that too much. You have to have a fun police dog mascot character run around. And it's yay, good fun happy times.
Also, one of your legions is a big dog, and you can do a bunch of cool stuff with it. It can sniff out trails for you, and you give it evidence and it'll sniff out trails. It can dig up items in the ground, and you can just get on its back and ride it around like a fucking horse, and it's awesome. And Astral Chain, game of the year so far for me. There's a lot of games left this year. I would not necessarily expect it to stay in that position, but I really, really love it. It's a great game.
Awesome. It's interesting with Astral Chain, because I feel while Astral Chain and Remedy are in many ways very different games, they have some weird similarities. So Control, I haven't quite finished it yet, but I am very close. I would have finished it if I'm not doing all the side quests right now, because I'm kind of in the point of the game where it opened up a lot, and so I spent basically all day yesterday just doing side quests, and now I feel I just finished chapter 7 of I think 10 chapters, but if you are just mainlining the main quest stuff, those chapters go pretty fast. So I suspect I probably have about 3 to 4 hours left in the game. So Control is the latest game from Remedy, which is a good kind of cult developer. They did Max Payne 1 and 2 back in the day. Both very good games. Then they did Alan Wake on the Xbox 360, a game I have not played, but I will probably play now, because there are lots of little hints in Control that, Control is, very clearly set in the same setting as Alan Wake. And I don't know much about Alan Wake other than the basic premise of it being a Stephen King-esque horror thing where, a writer goes into the northeast, New England area of America, and, weird shit starts happening. But yeah, so it's set in the same kind of supernatural setting as Alan Wake. Remedy then made Quantum Break on the Xbox One, which, from what I understand, that game, the people who like that game do like that game, but it also seems like that game got really fucked by the fact that Microsoft originally backed Remedy really hard on it, because at the beginning of the generation they had their whole Xbox TV studio and all of that, and Quantum Break was that game that was we made our game, and then we also made a TV show thing that, as when you hit a certain point in the game, you then watch this 20-minute live action TV show thing, and then you start playing the game again. And then in the middle of that game's development, the entire Xbox TV studio got scuttled because that whole initiative failed. And so, from what I understand, Quantum Break got really fucked by their all the studio turnover stuff that happened at Microsoft at the time. And so this is their first game since Quantum Break, and it's awesome. Control is a great, just amazing game. I'm having an utterly phenomenal time with it. And even though the only other Remedy games I've played are the old Max Payne 1 and 2 games, the identity of that studio is still so clearly in this game, and like the DNA is there, even though those games are like almost 20 years old at this point. And it's very cool for me to like revisit a studio that made games I played forever ago that I liked and be like, no, they're still trucking along. Like, this is still that studio. They're still making their own weird kind of quirky games. And kind of like with Platinum, they like Control is a game that, while existing technically in the AAA space, feels like it's so off doing its own thing, having a great time, and not necessarily like kind of bucking to the trends of most modern Western game development. And I think my sort of like my overall thesis on Control is that it feels like a game that like fell out of a time portal from the Xbox PS2 generation. It has like this like, it is technically a third-person shooter, but so much of it is about these weird like physics powers you have of like being able to lift objects in the environment and chuck them at enemies and to float around the environment when you get levitation and stuff, that it feels like it comes from the same like philosophy of game design that like Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast comes from, which is that like, let's just go for it. Like, we can do weird physics stuff, so let's do physics stuff as like a main gameplay mechanic, and let's like have this kind of pseudo like hub based, level based kind of world design. It has this, it's a third person shooter that has no cover mechanics at all. Like, you can duck in the game. I almost never do because there's no reason to. It's so much about you dashing around the environment, and if like you are using your gun in tandem with all these other abilities at the same time, in a way that just feels like it just comes from this lost era of like third person action games that we used to have that just kind of largely does not exist anymore. So the setup for Control is you play as a character named Jesse Faden, who at the beginning of the game walks into a building called the Oldest House, which is run by the Federal Bureau of Control, which is a secret like government agency in the United States, and the building is in New York City. That they basically research paranormal or supernatural events and specifically different kinds of items called objects of power. And sort of the paranormal setup of the game is the idea that human beings kind of imbue archetypal objects with different abilities by the collective unconscious. So the Federal Bureau of Control is filled with items like a rubber ducky, that this is like the Jungian archetype of a rubber duck, and because we all like the collective unconscious puts all this sort of like, kind of subconscious power into this image of the rubber duck, this specific rubber duck object has like powers because of it. And there's like, here's like the archetype of the like smoky like midnight motel in some backwater in America, and like this weird place has powers because it represents this archetype. There's like a swan boat from an amusement park. There's like a Japanese paper lantern that hangs outside of a ramen place. That's like that red paper lantern with the ramen logo on it. All of those kinds of objects are littered throughout this whole building. And all of them have different supernatural abilities associated with them. And so the cultural influences on Control and its setting very clearly come from Twin Peaks and the X-Files in that kind of like American supernatural like 90s kind of aesthetic in those ideas and that kind of tone. And this game is X-Files as fuck, like through and through, and it's great. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of the X-Files, and so all of these different objects feel like they could have had their own weird X-Files episode about them. So Jesse Faden walks into this building called the Oldest House, which is some sort of weird supernatural building that exists in New York City that unless you know where it is, you cannot find it, you cannot see it, you cannot go into it. It's only if you understand that the Oldest House is there are you even able to perceive that it exists. And it is a building that is effectively alive and shifts, and like rooms will move around the building. And so the Federal Bureau of Control has situated itself there. Jesse during her childhood had an encounter with one of the supernatural objects of power that caused an event in her hometown of Ordinary, which is a good name for a hometown for your character to come from. And during that event, her brother Dylan was lost, and she discovers that her brother was taken by the Federal Bureau of Control, and so that's why she's gone to the oldest house. And the game just, like, hits it immediately. Like, it gives you, like, a very brief cutscene at the beginning that gives you some of that basic information. Jessie, as a main character, is in a very Deadly Premonition-esque way. She's talking to this figure that she addresses as you, that is contextualized in the story as a specific thing, but until you find out what it is, and even after you find out what it is, it's basically her talking to the player in an internal monologue, which is a really clever way of delivering a lot of this exposition and giving Jessie a lot of texture as a character, because she's a great protagonist. So she just comes into the oldest house and walks into a room, and there's a man dead in that room that you later find out is a guy named Zachariah Trench, who was the director of the Federal Bureau of Control, who has died at the beginning of this outbreak of a supernatural force called the Hiss. You pick up the gun he used to kill himself, which is called the service weapon, which is a part of the oldest house. And the service weapon chooses you, Jesse Faden, to become the new director of the Federal Bureau of Control. And now you are tasked with solving this whole weird supernatural monster outbreak that's happening in this place, while you're also trying to find your brother and figure out what happened to him. And this is all shit that happens in, like, the first 7 minutes of the game.
Damn.
Also, there's a Finnish janitor named Ati who is there, who is like, maybe he's God. Like he talks about things in this weird like there's the first shot of the game is the main like the main office basically of the Federal Bureau of Control, the oldest house. And there's two big paintings on it. One is a big portrait of Zachariah Trench, the director, and next to it is a painting of Ati with his back turned to the portrait. And like below that Zachariah Trench's, it says Director Zachariah Trench, and then below Ati's it says the Bureau at Work. Like it's some sort of like, here's like the people who work here. And it's very creepy and has all these great vibes. And so you run into this weird janitor, and he kind of gives you directions to go figure out what's going on in this like weird offhand way, and it's great. And so the whole tone of the game is this delicious milieu of supernatural fiction, of like light horror and suspense. It's not a horror game. There's no like jump scares or anything, but it's that kind of like very light kind of supernatural psychological horror kind of stuff. It's very, very funny. Frequently you're constantly picking up different notes in the environment that are really, really well written, that both flesh out the like all the weird supernatural objects that exist in this place, but also just the like bureaucracy of the people working here having to deal with just bullshit on a constant basis of like, here's a TV that just floats around all the time, and like here's a mannequin that duplicates itself a million times over, and it's like, what is it like working in a place where that's just your daily life, is having to deal with weird different supernatural objects, or like trying to figure out, is this thing actually supernatural? Does it actually have powers or not? And so you're constantly kind of, in a almost like Doom 2016-esque way, you're constantly running into this like bureaucracy paired with the supernatural and the absurdity of these two things juxtaposed in a way that's really, really funny. And all of the environmental storytelling, all the little notes you find around the environment are incredibly well written, to the point where like I am just I have to read every single one, because they also are very concise. They're only ever usually about 2 paragraphs long at most. Some of them are shorter. So the game knows that like you get this little drop of like, I pick up this note, I'll like press my map button, like read the note, and then go on my way. And you're not like, it's not like Dishonored where you sometimes would be stuck reading page after page of text. The pickups fit into the pacing of the game really well. And some of my favorite ones, like I was just looking at this one earlier today. One of the best ones are the ones that are just like total slice of life, weird office bullshit going on. The best example being, when I entered one area, I picked up a note that said like, hey guys, like the Federal Bureau of Control book club, like here's like the book we're all reading for this month. Make sure that on this date, everyone write a review of the book and send them to me, not email, because you can't use modern technology in the Federal Bureau of Control, so it doesn't work. So everyone has like typewriters and CRT monitors and like rotary phones, because this game is fucking great. And there's like all this lore reasons for, like, it makes sense why that is. Like, they do explain it really well. But it's like basically you type up your review and hand them to me so I can generate talking points for our book club discussion. And then, like, 2 hours later, I found another random note in, like, a security guard's office or something that was a first draft of his review of this, like, YA novel, this fake YA novel that they were all reading. And the review was so fucking perfectly written. It was, as someone who relatively recently did a book review kind of writing assignment, like, it just, like, it nailed it so perfectly. And all the writing in the game has that. It can be so funny. And so one of the best parts of the game is that element, is exploring this weird setting, delving into the mysteries of this place, seeing, like, what is, like, the next thing they're going to come up with. Like, what is, like, the weird twist they're going to do on this side quest with, like, a mirror? What is, like, what are they going to do with this side quest of, like, with the merry-go-round? Like, all these different kind of weird objects and their ideas about how they would get these supernatural powers and kind of what they would represent. The other part of the game that is so good is the combat is fucking fantastic. The powers are so well realized and so smoothly implemented. The game feels super silky smooth to play. Like, Jessie as a character controls kind of like a platformer character that she turns on a dime. She's very, very mobile. And especially once you get your dash and your levitation ability, you can move around the environment with such kind of like speed and freedom. And there's such a sort of sense of verticality to the encounters, because when you get levitation, you can just fucking float up probably about a dozen feet into the air and just rain death on enemies below you, picking up chunks of concrete and chucking them at their head. And so just the feel of the movement and the combat is very tactilely satisfying. But this is also a game that feels like it has taken one of the all-time great classic video game pastimes of rolling into or dodging into objects in the environment to see them break in physics ways, and it has taken it to, like, the ultimate level. Like, this is the best game for rolling into barrels that we have yet made as a people. Like, back,
that
like,
should be
Ocarina
the back of the
Time,
box quote. That is such a good way to describe it.
It's so great, because it's something I love doing in games since Ocarina of Time. It's one of, like, my great loves of all the From Software games, like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro. All have great rolling into barrels and just seeing the barrel pop and just, like, the little bits jump around and, like, bounce around the environment. Control is a game where just everything in the environment is destructible. It's ridiculous the amount of like, it's that thing of when you enter a room and it looks pristine, and then you have a combat encounter and you leave that room and everything is destroyed, and just there's, like, paper strewn about as, like, folders with, like, documents have been exploded, and you, like, a wooden desk has been thrown against a concrete wall and the desk has shattered, but also chunks of concrete have fallen off of that wall. This is a game where when you go into, like, the bathrooms and they have the bathroom stalls with, like, the kind of plywood doors that bathroom stalls have, you can destroy those doors, which I've never seen a game have that kind of object be destructible. But it's like every time I go into a bathroom, I just dash into the doors, because your super dash you do just kind of passes through objects and then destroys them. So I'm just constantly, like, dodging through desks and see them break into pieces, or dodging through bathroom stalls and see them break apart and fucking, like, toilet lids go flying across the room. And then obviously you have your telekinesis powers, where you can pick up objects in the environment and throw them around, and so all those objects are really heavily destructible. But they also do this really clever thing where even if there's not a specific physics object in the environment you can lift up and throw, Jessie will just rip out chunks of, like, the ceiling or the floor. And so if you're, like, fighting in a room with porcelain tiles, she'll just rip out a chunk of, like, the tiles out of the floor and throw those. And so no matter where you are in the environment, you always can use that telekinesis power. So it's something where it makes that power the best version of that kind of power I've ever seen in a game, because it gets rid of the finicky, like I have to aim at and pick up a specific thing. It's like, no matter what's around you, like sometimes you'll want to pick up like a big forklift or something when you upgrade your power and you can lift heavy objects. Sometimes you do want to try to pick up a specific thing because it will do more damage. But if you're just trying to like chuck like object after object after object to just like maximize your damage, she will just constantly be grabbing stuff and you never have to worry about it. But it also just highlights how everything in the environment is not just like, this is an object that breaks. All the breakable objects are like segmented into really kind of like minute pieces. So they often break in really different, interesting ways. And it's just the most advanced version of that I've ever seen. Like, it takes it to such another level to where I'm constantly just dashing through shit and seeing things explode. And it's so satisfying. And the way that enemies pop when you just pick up a fucking like gas tank and throw it at their head. This has the best fire extinguisher explosions. I mean, all the explosions of the game are amazing. The fire extinguisher ones in particular are great. And this is the kind of game it is. It feels like a video game made by people that have been playing games all their lives and know that, like, if there's a fire extinguisher in your video game and I shoot it, it should fucking explode. And any video game that has fire extinguishers and they don't explode is a failure of a video game, because this is what video games are. And this feels like a game made by that kind of culture. And that's one of the things that makes it feel like it comes out of this like 90s PC game tradition that has been mostly lost, is that all those games did that. All those games are like, if we're going to put this object in the environment and it's like colored red, it is going to be like interactable in some fun, interesting way, because everything in the environment must be important. Because those games didn't have the kind of, resources that modern games have. And a lot of modern games have kind of lost that sense of excitement at being able to play with those things. And it's that thing of where, like, it used to be like such a sign of pride when a video game would have like reflections in mirrors. Back in the 90s, it was such a huge thing. And then, like, there are some games like Hitman that do that still and like do it well and do cool things with it. Most video games just kind of like, we're not going to bother with it. And Control feels like a game that's like, nah, we're going to, like, if there's a fun, cool thing we can do and put into the game, we're going to like work to put it in there. And it has that kind of philosophy to it. It feels so much like a Half-Life 1 or something like that. And it has that kind of attention to detail that games used to have, that so many games have kind of lost as they have like exploded their like sort of the scope of what they're trying to do. Sometimes you lose sight of the minutia, and this is a game that never, ever, ever loses sight of the minutia.
That's what I was about to say, Sean, is it sounds like a kind of pay-on to environmental minutia, which is, I think, kind of a lost art. I mean, what it makes me think of, like, from my points of reference, would be like back when Valve used to make games. That's one of the things Valve was just great at in all their games up through Portal 2, and I think it's one of the things we miss not having, like, Valve as an active developer anymore, because they were one of the last, I feel like, to still be doing that really actively. So yeah, that all sounds really fun.
Yeah, because this is a team that, again, like, Half-Life 1 is a very clear point of comparison. Like, it has a very similar kind of tone to it. The Black Mesa Research Facility in Half-Life 1 and the Federal Bureau of Control both feel like the same kind of like living environments that you have kind of stumbled into as everything is falling apart, as these monsters are invading. So it just feels like this 90s game that got like displaced in time and has all this incredible tech shoved into it, basically. In a way that, like, I just didn't realize I had missed this kind of game so much. But it's just, they really are so rare these days. And Control is just an amazing example of it. Like, everything in the game is executed so well. And there's just stuff of, like, I'm constantly running into stuff that kind of blows my mind that they have thought of this. Like, there's like a specific thing they do with a collectible related to a mirror side quest. For people who play the game, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. That, like, I kind of saw what they were doing, and it was like, are they going to do this? And then they did it, and I'm like, this is fucking, these people are geniuses. Like, the little tiny things of, like, it feels like they never miss a trick. Like, they always kind of know, they're one step ahead of the player in a way of knowing what to do, or like where to put a little like extra teaser in the game. There's so many little like hidden passages and stuff like that. And this is a game that has like Doom 1 style secret areas that like when you find them, a little text box pops up in the corner that says like secret area found exclamation mark, and then it gives you a fucking level up point. And it's like, hell yeah. Like video games used to do that. Video games used to have this kind of secret hidden all over the place, and they just don't anymore. Like this is a game that like the one thing they're missing is just having cheat codes. Like if they just had cheat codes that gave you like infinite energy bar, like that's the only thing that this game is missing to like fully execute on that kind of premise and that feel that it has. Yeah, and the main story is like the sort of A plot with Jessie and her brother and the Hiss, which are the monsters, is not like I think it kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's very interesting. Sometimes it feels a little bit sort of like standard, and the game's energies are more like kind of around the edges, which are really fleshed out. But I am hitting a point, kind of getting closer to the end of the main story, where that stuff is picking up a lot, and there's some particularly once you meet Dylan. He is a really interesting character, and it kind of refocuses the story really well. But there's a little bit before you find him that gets a little bit kind of lost in the weeds almost. But all the stuff around the edges is amazing. They have all this good like live action footage stuff where there's the head researcher for the Federal Bureau of Control is a character named Dr. Darling, who I think is played by the actor who played Alan Wake in the Alan Wake games. And all of his stuff is in live action, and so you just come across like weird videos of him like giving lectures about the places of power and all this weird bullshit and like ley lines and all the stuff the game has, and those are great. The best ones are these messages that are left behind by Zachariah Trench, the previous director whose job you have taken after he dies, who is played by the actor who played Max Payne, who is so good, such perfect casting. And the messages sort of left behind by him are played over these videos that are like, basically feel like cut scenes from like the opening theme for the X-Files of like this dude's like silhouetted against this like harsh blue light, and he's constantly smoking and like adjusting his glasses in silhouette, and he's got like this deep like gritty noir kind of voice in it, like kind of like older Max Payne. And his characterization basically feels like what if Fox Mulder from the X-Files became the cigarette smoking man. Like what if he like went up like the corporate ladder and was in control of the government conspiracies, is basically what his character is. And so you just get these like 2-minute long monologues from him just going on about the hotline is the place of power tied to the director. It gives us access to the beyond, to the netherworld, to things that we've never seen before, but things that we need for the Bureau to survive. And he's just giving these long, cryptic, dark monologues while constantly you're just seeing him smoking in the background, and you constantly picking up little notes about people complaining because the Bureau is supposed to be a smoke-free area, but he's always smoking, and he's got his fucking ashtray, and it's so good. This game just like it hits the tone so perfectly, and so all of that stuff is so good that even if the game wasn't fun to play, I would be super into it because it's so my bullshit. But the game is also so much fun to play and just 100% knows how to kind of execute on like the physics powers kind of concept incredibly well, and make it just a vital part of the combat that is never kind of finicky in a way that those powers used to be when they were more common in games, like with Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast. So Control gets like a super high recommendation. I love this game so much. I think it's just such a pleasure and such a kind of breath of fresh air next to a lot of the other, particularly like Western game development, which we've talked about before, feeling so samey and like so focused on like the big, huge concepts and big, huge budget projects and big open world things that sometimes lose sight of kind of what is often actually the most fun, interesting things to do in games. And Control is just, it's something very special. And so I think you'd really like it, Jonathan. I think most people, if you've been playing games for a long time, Control is going to like hit you in a specific way that feels really good.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, I have no idea when I'm going to be able to play it before the end of the year, because the schedule from like September 20th to the end of the year is fucking stacked for me in terms of games I know I'm playing. But I definitely want to, and I will be keeping an eye. This is one I will definitely have on my wish list for Black Friday when that rolls around.
Right, yeah.
Because I assume this will be a game that gets good sales, and I will definitely be trying to pick it up. So definitely on my radar. And I was a little bummed when this and Astral Chain came out like on the same day, because I'm like, I really want to play both of these. Astral Chain I had pre-ordered because Control was not on my map. It kind of came out of left field, I think, like especially because it had this big critical swell when the reviews launched, but it had not been getting a ton of promotion, I feel like. So very cool. I'm glad we had two good games to talk about today.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I'm very excited to finish Control because it's really good. And then also they announced that they're going to be there's going to be some free content later this year for Control, but there's also going to be 2 paid expansions released in 2020. And one of them, because they released basically their content roadmap thing. And the second one is called AWE, which in the world of Control stands for Altered World Event, which is specifically when an object of power causes a big kind of event somewhere in the world that's which is the thing that happened with Jesse's kind of hometown of Ordinary, and everything gets fucked up. So AWE stands for that, but the logo that says AWE just has the cover art for Alan Wake in it. You can which is a cover art that's really good. It's because it's Alan Wake silhouetted against this kind of fog light with his flashlight in the woods behind him. It's a very distinctive cover art that even though I hadn't played that game, I recognized immediately. And then you realize that AWE also could mean Alan Wake expansion, which is very good.
That's awesome.
So I'm probably going to end up playing Alan Wake at some point between now and when that expansion comes out. Because also all the collectibles that refer to Alan Wake, because I found a dozen or so, they refer to his character and things that happened in that location. They really do a lot to kind of combine whatever that game was going on in that game with what's going on in Control, that it kind of feels since that game was a steeper hit that was not played by a bunch of people, they're if Control hits it big, we're going to put in enough nuggets in here to make people really want to go play Alan Wake, because Alan Wake was probably very good and a lot of people like me just never got around to it. So it's now I just really want to play it because all the little hints that they give of what was going on in that game sound really interesting.
That's awesome. I love that. All right. Well, are we wrapping up with these 2 games, Sean? Actually, I wanted to say, I almost forgot. While you were talking, I did look it up because you mentioned the Platinum Games game Vanquish. It is also on Xbox One backwards compatibility, which is really cool. So if you get a 360 copy, you can also play that on the Xbox One, and copies are very cheap. Because I was looking it up because everything you said about it made me want to also play that. Again, don't know when I will, but I'll put it on the list.
The good thing about Vanquish is that game, you can beat it in 6 hours.
Yeah.
It's very short, to the point. It's a very focused action game. So when I played it in 2 sittings. So people should play Vanquish. That game is fucking rad.
Yeah. So more ways to play that than I think we initially thought. So awesome. And and then you got Control. You've got Astral Chain. Plenty of recommendations from us this week. Next week on the Nintendo Switch, we're getting Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. I'm very excited for that. End of the month, we're getting Dragon Quest XI on Switch. I'm sure there's stuff coming out on other systems. What's the next game you're looking forward to, Sean?
I think it's Call of Duty.
Is that early October?
If there's anything else. Yeah, because there's also, at some point, I actually need to fucking play Devil May Cry 5, which I've had for 8 months or something at this point that I've just kind of been waiting on. So there's some of those games that I want to catch up on. But yeah, there's definitely Modern Warfare I want to get to. I need to get back and finish Dragon Quest Builders 3 or Builders 2 because I kind of left it off at a good place to pick it up again. But I was I need to play something different and that is not as time consuming as that game.
I don't think I've talked about it. The final push of Dragon Quest Builders 2 is really good. I liked the ending of that game a lot.
Awesome, yeah. I didn't fall off of it for anything to do with that game. It was more just I need to play something that is more consumable in chunks the way that Control is.
Builders 2 it's fucking long. I think it's probably too long, but it took me 50 hours to beat overall, and I was playing it quicker than you did, Sean. But definitely the second half of that game has a lot of really, really good stuff in it. I know you were on Moonbrook last time we talked. The big finale of the game has a lot of great stuff in it. So anyway, that's game stuff. Sean, before we break for this week and move on to next week, I want to do a little fun completely non sequitur event here.
Okay. Yes.
We're going to talk politics for a second. And if you hate when we talk politics, this is not going to be controversial politics whatsoever. We're going to be having fun with it, all right? And we're talking about the Democrats, all right? We are talking about this is the Democratic primaries going on right now, Sean. A lot of candidates. You've probably been following it. I've been following it. Front runner at the moment is Mr. Joe Biden, former Vice President of the United States. I'd say probably not either of our first choices at the moment.
No, yeah.
But I mean, I like Joe Biden. I've never disliked Joe Biden. I still like him. I don't think he should be our nominee because, if for no other reason, I don't want someone who's 90 years old at the end of their second term. Just not trying to be ageist. Yeah. It's just kind of a fact of life. But Joe Biden has a way of... I think too many people attribute this to his age and not just his Joe Biden-ness, but he has a way of going on sort of weird tangents, as we know. And I don't know, did you see the clip, Sean, that it's actually not new, I realized this later, but it came back on Twitter and into the news today, of him telling a story in 2017 about a guy named Corn Pop?
Okay, so I had seen you tweeted about this like a little bit ago before we started the podcast, and I watched the first 10 seconds of it and was like, I'm not going to watch this right now because we're going to do the podcast soon.
Yeah.
So I'm only vaguely aware of it.
Yes. Okay, so for context, because what we're going to do, Sean, is I'm going to have you do a dramatic reading of Joe Biden's Corn Pop monologue because it is the funniest politics-related thing I have seen in forever. It some people were making, I think, too much hay out of this of more proof Joe Biden shouldn't be the nominee. To me, it's this story is the ultimate grandpa story, which is that Grandpa Simpson archetype, but we've all known a person like this who just tells a rambling story that seemingly takes forever to go nowhere. That's kind of what Biden did here. This was from 2017. He's talking to, I think he's in his hometown, and he's talking about this time when he was a lifeguard at a pool in a mostly black neighborhood. And I sent you the file, Sean. Feel free to open it. And please read us the story of Joe Biden and Corn Pop, because it is the funniest fucking shit. And you're good at dramatically reading things. And I also, if you haven't seen it yet, I want to see if you can do this without laughing.
Okay, yeah. So, because important context, I only have seen the very beginning of that video, so probably only the first couple of sentences are things I'm aware of. You did not tell me that we were going to do this. You only told me that there was a surprise. You sent me an email and told me not to open it. I have now opened the email and opened the document, and so I will now read Joe Biden's speech. I learned a lot, and I learned that it makes a difference. This was the diving board area, and I was one of the guards, and they weren't allowed to... It was a 3-meter board. If you fell off sideways, you landed on the dam, on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad dudes. And I did...
He ran a bunch of bad boys.
Days,
that's the line.
Oh, no. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. Sorry. I filled that in with the word that it probably should have been. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use... If you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. So I said, "Hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." My car, these are all public housing behind you. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, "I'll be waiting for you." He was waiting there with 3 guys with straight razors. No joke. There was a guy named Bill Rightmouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was the mechanic. And I said, "What am I going to do?" And he said, "Come down here in the basement where the mechanics, where all the pool filter is. You know the chain? There used to be a chain that went across the deep end." And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up. He said, "You walk out with that chain. You walk to that car and say, 'You may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head.'" I said, "You're kidding me." He said, "No, if you don't come back, if you don't come back." And he was right. So I walked out with the chain, and I walked it back to my car, and they had, in those days, you remember the straight razor? You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in the rain barrel, getting them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart then. I said, first of all, is a very good old person thing to say. When I tell you to get off the board, you get off the board. I'll kick you out again. But I shouldn't have called you Esther, Williams. I apologize for that. I apologize. But I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, you apologize to me? I said, I apologize, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said. He said, okay, close the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again.
Sean, if Joe Biden's campaign promise was that he would tell a different old person story like this every day from the Rose Garden, I would be canvassing for him out there right fucking now, because this is entertaining shit. This is fun.
Yeah, I mean, I can, see his, campaign slogan right now is gonna take the chain to the GOP, and it's just fucking Joe Biden with a big rusted chain in one hand.
I mean, there's a couple... This to me actually is weirdly the appeal of Joe Biden, is that I 100% have heard my dad tell stories like this. This is
absolutely.
Such a American Midwest... Not even Midwest, probably, because Joe Biden's from Delaware, but, American, 1940s, 50s, 60s, I feel like it's very, Eisenhower-era, childhood story of, being at the pool and something weird happens. And it's weirdly, relatable in the sense of, Joe Biden talks like this, and I think he gets that everyman vibe for it. It's very, for lack of a better term, authentic. But it just goes so... The part where, you couldn't write a better old person story than this, because there's the whole part with the fucking chain. And I love that you have... This was 2017, Sean. He was former 8-year vice president of the United States, going out there talking about how he cut off 6 feet of chain, and he was going to beat up a dude named Corn Pop with it, who had a rusty razor. And it's so funny. I can't believe it.
It's just all the random asides about this used to be a housing whatever, or it's back in the day when people wore pomade in their hair. It's what the fuck are you talking about? What does this have to do with anything?
It's so funny. It's literally a Grandpa Simpson monologue from The Simpsons. There's one of my favorite Simpsons lines ever is the thing about how Grandpa Simpson's going to Shelbyville and he tied an onion on his belt, which was the style back then. And back then, nickels had a bumblebee on them. 3 Bs for a quarter, we used to say. It's totally like that. And it's just,
yep.
I don't know. I think he should get out in the 4th debate, Sean, and for his opening statement, just do the Corn Pop story. And just lean in.
Yeah,
that is peak Joe Biden right there.
I mean, it's effectively, I think, the only strategy I can imagine the Democrats employing that can counteract Trump in some way. It's the same. It's less offensive, but it's the same kind of appeal of just fuck it, man. I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
whatever. At least it sounds like he vaguely believes himself when he's talking. That's something I can accept in a politician.
Yes, and it's because Trump and Biden are both sort of dotty old guys who seem like they're not quite all there. Trump clearly has actual mental problems that I don't think Joe Biden has, but Biden is not the active hateful racist version of that. He's just the kind of weird funny dude. So yeah, I mean, this is what happens when you put a guy who is both 78 years old out on the campaign trail, and B, has been in politics for most of those 78 years. And he's talking about Corn Pop. I don't know. This was one of the few moments of genuine levity in this campaign for me, Sean, where I just got to laugh and not feel that bad about it.
It's nice to have something happening in relation to politics that doesn't make you just sick to your stomach, which has been the mode for the past 4 years at this point.
Also, I saw a lot of people speculating that Biden was just bullshitting this whole story, but when he said this in 2017, people did vet it, and people who were there at the time do say they remember Biden coming out with the chain at Corn Pop. Which is, because that's the thing, if you know people like Joe Biden, like I think you and I would say we maybe have known in our lives, I totally believe that story. I don't believe why you would necessarily tell it on the campaign trail, but I believe that it's something he would tell to his grandkids.
Yes, yeah, the context of him just because is he he's standing out in a field basically, just giving the speech to these people. It's okay, Grandpa. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the chain.
Yeah.
Right.
He's going to take the chain to the Taliban. That's going to be his foreign policy in Afghanistan. No. But anyway, Yeah, so the Democratic primary, it's crazy. Some of it's kind of a bummer. There's too many candidates. Some of them are much too old, but sometimes you get this out of it, and it's great.
You know, we just need to get 6 foot of rusty chain, Jonathan, and that will solve all of our problems.
Bernie Sanders is a year older than Joe Biden. He's got to have a story like this in him. I think Bernie would do well to just lean into his own old madness at some point.
Yeah, I think that would help appeal him more to me if he just if he had a story about fighting someone who had a rusty razor blade and he had a chain. It's like, yeah, fucking talk about something real, something we can all relate to. Chain fights.
Indeed. All right. So that was just for fun. But Sean, this has been episode 299 of the Weekly Stuff Podcast, which means the next regular episode of the show will be episode 300. Come hell or high water, next time you and I talk about something that isn't Gundam, it will be episode 300. Are you ready?
Yep. I need to order my list, but yes, my heart is ready.
Yeah, so just so you guys know, I don't know if 300 will be next week or 2 weeks from now. You and I are going to hash that out after the show. We're going to see where we fall down on that. But episode 300 will be our new top 10 TV shows list, with the top 10 TV shows asterisk not anime, because we wanted to segment off anime because it was too hard to put, like, Gundam and Dragon Ball next to X-Files and The Simpsons or whatever, you know?
Yeah, my list in particular would have been fucked because, like, it would have probably been mostly anime. I think over half of my list would have been anime if we didn't do this, and it does just become. I think it's more interesting when we limit it and, like, both have to talk about, like, shows that are vaguely similar at the very least, instead of, like, you put the X-Files and, like, Naruto or whatever. Not that Naruto wouldn't be on my top 10, but, like, just to, like, give the most two absurd examples I can think of, a, like, police procedural and Naruto. I don't know how you compare those two TV shows. Like, I would have a hard enough time comparing, like, a comedy to a drama, let alone throwing Naruto in the mix.
You know, Sean, I think Fox Mulder is to the FBI what Naruto Uzumaki is to his village in Naruto.
Oh my god, that's fairly true. That's more accurate a comparison than I would have initially thought, but the more I think about it, the more But then that would make Scully the Sakura, and I don't want that. So we have to nix that because Scully is great and Sakura is only okay.
Okay, but anyway, we will be doing that on episode 300. I'm gonna probably put the call out on Twitter at some point, but tell me your favorite TV shows. I'd love to hear that. We did something similar on our video game soundtracks episode, and that was a lot of fun hearing from the audience. Any favorite podcast memories you have, let us know. This is episode 300. Weekly Suit Gundam will still be going at some point. You know, I do apologize to anyone who is, like, not listening to the Gundam episodes and is maybe feeling like they're getting less content. I totally understand if that's a disappointment. The Gundam thing kind of hit us unexpectedly because we were going to do it as a limited series over the summer, and we had so much fun with it that it is continuing because we're really passionate about it, and it has found a new audience as well that maybe had not listened to the show before, and I'm very happy about that and hopefully bring more people into the fold. You know, so we're trying our best. I think ideally we would have not tried to keep all of this going at once to have a busy time of the year and trying to do a second podcast. It just shook out like that. And I'm sure we'll find a rhythm with it eventually. We're having fun with all.
Jonathan, I think your version of it just shook out like that is we watched Gundam and then you couldn't restrain yourself, so you watched like 7 Gundam shows like in the span of a month. Because the original plan was just we'll do the 5 episodes on. It was going to be 4 episodes of Mobile Suit Gundam. Then we did the movies as like a cappers, and then it became 5. And then you fell in, and I'm not going to blame anybody for falling in love with Gundam. I watched the entirety of the Gundam franchise within the span of 1 year. So. Yeah. Like, you know, people living in glass houses shouldn't throw beam rifles or whatever, however metaphor you want to use. Crackers, like the Xeon grenade. But yeah, so, you know, this was something that you had control over. If you had wanted to pace yourself, then we wouldn't, it wouldn't be the scenario where We're almost done with like all of the Universal Century Gundam stuff. We're getting like shockingly close.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually way past the point we even are to do podcasts on. I'm gonna have to like go back and rewatch things. It's crazy. It's crazy. But yeah, it's fun. I'm enjoying it. I know you're enjoying it, Sean. So we're gonna try to keep the balance going. But I think, you know, maybe for a little while you can expect the kind of alternating once a week thing. Certainly by the time I think we get to November and there's a bajillion video games and shit, we might put Gundam on, because we're close to a point where we might put the Gundam show on hold for a little bit, but we'll see when we get there.
Yeah.
But it's fun, and you know, if you just haven't been watching because you don't think Gundam is for you, try it. It's so good.
There was a time when I thought Gundam wasn't for me. There was a time when I was that naive. Now I know very differently. Now I've got a tall geese sitting behind my computer.
Yes. All right. So anyway, that's it for this week. Very fun show. We talked about video games. We talked about corn pop. And onwards to episode 300, Sean.
I got to go get my chain.